into this place. We love you, Jesus Christ.
Good morning. Welcome to First Baptist Church. We're glad you're here today, especially if you're here for the first time. If you've never been with us before, we're glad you're here today. We'd love to know who you are. If you would fill out one of those welcome cards in the pew in front of you, put it in the offering plate in a moment. I'd love to send you a letter of welcome. If you have any questions, if you have any prayer requests, put them there. I'd love to meet you. We'll be back after the service. If you're a regular attender, you're also welcome to put in any prayer requests that you have. I want to invite you back tonight for a special service at 6 o'clock. We continue our study in the book of Romans, Romans chapter 13. And at the end of this month, we heard the announcements, we'll be doing our Sunday evening service on the talk. So that will be in 2 weeks on October 28th. Would you stand, please, with us and join as we sing number 14, Praise to the Lord the Almighty.
Free. Have you ever been hungry? Get one of those out. What do you do when you're hungry? Hold on for now, I'll give you a minute, okay? Here you go. Just hold on for it. What do you do if you're hungry at home? Where do you go? Do you ask your mom to give you something to eat? That's what most of us do. You always have food in your cabinets or in your refrigerator. Now, we're not leaving right now, okay? No, we're not saving it for later, okay? I want to tell you a story about... Maybe. Okay, I'll tell you a story about two little boys. Their names are Brad and Alex. And they live with their mom. And she works and she doesn't make a lot of money, but she has to pay bills, just like we all do. So sometimes Brad and Alex don't have a lot to eat. So she was lucky enough to find a church nearby that could help her. And Brad and Alex get free lunch at school, so they get to eat during the week. But on the weekend, they don't. So the church was going to help them out on the weekends by providing food for them, okay? And so that way they'd have food all the time. And you know, we have backpacks at school, which is bags of food for boys and girls to take home that don't have a lot of food. So they won't be hungry on the weekends when they're not in school. And we also have our church here, which provides food 2 times a month for people. And that's why we're celebrating Global Hunger Sunday today. Because there's thousands and thousands of people and billions of people all over the world that don't have enough food to eat. So we're celebrating, not celebrating, but recognizing Global Hunger Sunday today. And we've got a box over here, and we've got boxes all around the church for people to put food in. You do. Do you ever share your food with your friends at school? Or when you're out playing, do you ever share your food with them?
We don't share food at school.
You don't share food at school? Okay. But do you share your food if you're playing with some of your friends? You don't? You know, that's what Jesus wants us to do. He tells us in the Bible that we should. But he tells us that we should love one another. And if we love one another, then we want to share and help them, don't we? That's what we want to do. So the scripture, we're not going to eat right now, okay? The scripture for today is Proverbs 22:9. And in that scripture, it reminds us that the generous will themselves be blessed when they share their food with the poor. So it's telling us in the Bible that we can share our food with people who don't have food. And that's what we're going to do today with this food. I went to the grocery store yesterday. You can have whatever you want, because I've got bags over here. But what we're going to do today is we're going to share our food so that the hungry children in our county, where we live, will be able to eat. So can we bow our heads in prayer for just a minute? Dear Father, we thank you for these boys and girls, and we thank you that they don't go hungry. But we also pray that they will realize that we do need to help those who are hungry and to share our food with them. But with them down here this week, bless them and keep them safe. In the name we pray. Amen.
As our ushers prepare to take this morning's offering, let's stand together and sing on Jordan's Stormy Banks I Stand, number 521. Offering hymn, would you stand with me, please, as we sing on Jordan's Stormy Banks I Stand, number 521.
King.
that you give to us so freely. And Lord, we give back to you today because we want to bring honor to you, because we want to submit not just our budgets, but our lives to you. We pray that you take and use this today to bring honor and glory to your precious name, in which name we pray. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated.
praise Him with my hands, my heart, my life, my all. I will worship and praise Him. Glory to God in the highest. Glory forever. Amen. Glory to God in the highest. All glory belongs to Him. All glory belongs to Him. I will praise Him. All glory belongs to Him.
Salt and light. Two things that make a difference. Two things that Jesus chose out of all the things in the universe to represent us and our dangerous mission. Are you old enough to remember the old TV show with Peter Graves, Mission Impossible? Maybe you're too young and you know the modern movie series that lasts longer than the TV series. And in each one, they were given an impossible mission if they chose to accept it. Jesus has given us a mission that is not impossible, but it is difficult, it is dangerous. If we're going to make a difference, we need to be salt and light. God made us to make a difference. When something doesn't make a difference, it's unimportant, right? It doesn't matter, it's useless. And that's one of the problems with atheistic evolution. If you and I are the product of time and chance, a cosmic accident without intrinsic value, without real significance, without meaningful purpose, we don't matter. But God says you do, and He wants you to be like salt and light. Today I want to tell you the story of a missionary couple who were salt and light. God called them in their church in the United States to go to the foreign fields. And so Mark and Holly Woodard volunteered, and they packed up and they moved off to Papua New Guinea, where they were in the middle of nowhere. Then was born Brent. And at 2 years old, Brent and his mom, Mark and Holly, were in the middle of nowhere. They were a 3-hour boat ride from the closest plane, the closest city, the capital of the area. And to get to that plane was the only way they could get to any hospital or any medical care of any kind. And so in their dangerous mission, the Woodards found out when Brent was 2 years old how dangerous it was when little Brent started having constant seizures. And they were at least a 10-hour trip from any medical care. Was this trip going to cost them their firstborn son? God had given His firstborn son for them. They were in Papua New Guinea to be salt and light, but they were beginning to learn how dangerous this mission really was. In the Sermon on the Mount, our text for the next several weeks, we've been learning about our dangerous mission. It's not impossible, but it is dangerous. Last week we looked at Jesus' intro to this first and most famous sermon, a series of counterintuitive blessings we call the Beatitudes. We took them as an 8-part challenge to be different. We handed out caution tape to you to remind you of not that you should be cautious, but that the world should be cautious around you. I put mine around my key ring, so every time I open a door, I'm reminded of my dangerous mission. God calls us to be different, to be salt and light. And so today, we ought to learn. Last week was the intro. We took some challenges. But today, we want to learn to make a difference by being salt and light. Jesus warned us that if we're different, if we take action, we we live dangerous, we can expect opposition and persecution. If we are different, we will be dangerous to the world. But Jesus now moves on to what our mission is in Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. He says, here's your mission should you decide to accept it, or whether you accept it or not. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out, trampled underfoot by men. Here it is. Salt has a purpose, a mission, if you will. If it doesn't accomplish that mission, it doesn't make a difference. And Jesus said it's good for nothing. Well, we don't want to be good for nothing. We want to make a difference. That's why we were created. Jesus continues in verse 14. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand that gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. A light that is hidden is wasted. Doesn't make any difference. Doesn't fulfill its purpose. So if salt doesn't salt and light doesn't shine, they don't make a difference. And if we don't do what God has called us to do, we don't make a difference. You remember the children's song, This Little Light of Mine, I'm going to let it shine? Hide it under a bushel? No, I'm going to let it shine. Why? In order that they may see your good works. Those Beatitudes we looked at last week, they don't save us, they change us, but they fulfill us. They help us do what we were designed to do, make a difference. People can't see your heart, but they can see and they can feel your works. So last week we challenged you with the 8-day Beatitude Challenge. I trust that you've tried at least one. I'm on day 8 today, and I made 6 of the first 7 off to make up that one that I missed. But I'm encouraging you to be different and go out and make a difference today by being salt and light. Here are the details of your mission dangerous. 2 everyday things, salt and light. Let's start first with salt. The first part of our mission is salting where you are. If you were to get all your information from televangelists about what Jesus' mission is, you'd think that Jesus challenged us to be the sugar of the earth, right? Life is nothing but dessert. We just need to be sweet to everybody. A spoonful of sugar. Not to help the medicine go down, because we don't need medicine, because according to them, we're not even sick. But Jesus came not to call us to be sugar, not to give us whatever we want. He called us to be salt. Now, salt and sugar look exactly alike. As a matter of fact, one of these is salt and one of them is sugar. And I can't remember which one it is now. What would it be like if I took the salt and put it into a cake mix? Instead of a cup of sugar and a teaspoon of salt, I put in a cup of salt. Teaspoon, do you want that piece of cake? Or how about if I'm making something else, maybe steak and potatoes, and I used a cup of sugar and only a teaspoon of salt? You don't want to mess the two up, right? Jesus didn't call us to be sugar. He called us to be salt. And this is really life. Life where we are not healthy and wealthy, or bad things do happen to good people. A dangerous world where shipwrecks happen, where hurricanes hit, and life-saving stations are needed, where churches are needed. And the Jesus of the Bible, not the Jesus of the TV, calls us to live in and be salt in the world and make a difference in that real world. But I want you to notice one thing first, very carefully. Jesus doesn't technically call us to be salt in the world. Look at it again. He says, you are the salt of the earth. You see it? Jesus didn't say you should be the salt of the earth. Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. You're the only salt the earth is only going to ever get, whether you know it or not, whether you act like it or not. So it's not really our mission to be salt, but it's our mission to be what we are. We are the salt of the earth, where we are. And this is a big difference. You can tell sugar, this is the sugar, I think. Be salt. You can tell it all you want to be salt, but it can't, right? Because it's not. But you don't tell salt to be salt. It is. It's salt whether you tell it so or not. But when you take it out of the salt shaker and you put it in the world, then it makes the difference, right? So here we are not supposed to have a little pep talk and say, come on, salt, be salt. You are the salt of the earth. I don't have to say, be a child of God. You are a child of God, whether you act like it or not. But what I encourage you today is to do your job as salt. What is it? What is the job of salt? Here's what salt does. First of all, it preserves. When it calls us the salt of the earth, in the ancient world, salt was a necessity of life, not just to help make food taste better, but it's a world that we can hardly imagine, a world without refrigeration. Salt's number one job in the first century, when Jesus spoke, was preserving food. It was their way of preventing spoilage. Now today we have refrigeration and we have artificial preservatives that we wonder about. They would salt food to preserve it, but it also made it taste good. And so for them, salt was very, very valuable. You ever heard someone say, well, he or she's worth their salt? Well, that soldiers used to get paid in salt. As a matter of fact, our English word salary comes from the Latin word for salt. In Leviticus chapter 2, verse 13, Moses commanded that the sacrificial offerings be offered with salt so that they would be prevented from spoiling. As fishermen, Jesus' disciples knew the value of salt. Every time they caught fish, they would pack them in salt, not just to make them taste better, but to keep them so they could use them later or sell them. They knew the preservative value of salt and its great value. So is Jesus calling us to be salt as a preservative? Do we preserve the world and keep God from destroying it? Do we keep society from crumbling? Well, hopefully we function that way, but that's not all that salt does. Salt also not only preserves, but it cleanses. What happens if you have a pool for your children and you don't put any chlorine in it? It turns colors and kids don't want to swim in it anymore, right? You have to put some kind of chemicals in it. It'll turn nasty if you don't. What chemical keeps our oceans clean? Salt, right? More and more pool owners are moving from chlorine to salt. The reason we call it salt water is because it is 3.5% salt. You ever taste a little bit when you jump in the water? It's salty, isn't it? As a matter of fact, your eyes are cleansed and are kept free from disease by salt water. Your tears are salt. You ever tasted them? Now, they're not as salty as the sea. They're only about 1% salt. But your tears are made of salt water. 2 Kings 2. Prophet Isaiah, or Elisha, cleansed some bad water with salt. In Ezekiel 16, some wounds were cleansed with salt. Is Jesus calling us to function as salt and cleanse society, change its laws, make it more moral? Maybe. But what's the first thing we think of when we think of salt? We think of flavor, right? Wasn't that what Jesus says right there? He's talking about, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor. In Job 6:6, Job says, can flavorless food be eaten without salt? Yeah, if you're in a hospital, right? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? Not much. You know, I'll never forget my wife's first home-cooked meal. I came home from my first day at work as a married man, and my wife had slaved away all day on the chicken pot pie, and it looked beautiful. She had made handmade dough and rolled it out. It was stuffed with chicken, and it was cooked to perfection. It looked awesome. And she anxiously waited for me to take my first bite. And when I did, I smiled, and I chewed, and I finally looked over at her sheepishly and said, Lynn, this is great, but did you put any salt or any spices in it whatsoever? And she began to cry, no, Jeffrey. She has not forgotten since. Oh, she can flavor food well, but it was missing something when it was missing salt. So I got a salt shaker, and it was delicious. She never forgets now. It not only flavors the food, it also creates thirst, right? Boy, these pretzels are making me thirsty. Now that's what Jesus is saying here. We're supposed to flavor the world, make it taste better. We're supposed to make the world thirsty for God. We're supposed to make a difference by our good works. The world is supposed to notice that we're different and create a thirst in other people for God. That's part one of our mission dangerous. Now I have a second question, but it's a scientific question. Can salt lose its saltiness. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, can salt lose its flavor? Now, chances are, in your spice rack, you have a lot of different spices, not just salt and pepper. And if you do, some of those spices are probably 5 to 10 years old, and they probably have no flavor left in them whatsoever. I would recommend, if it's over a few months old, go home, throw it away, get you some fresh basil, get you some fresh oregano, put it on, and you'll be amazed at the difference, because those are ground up seeds and ground up leaves, and they lose their flavor. Does salt lose its flavor? Now, the salt makers want you to think so you go out and buy more salt. But salt is not ground up leaves or ground up seeds. It's a chemical compound, sodium chloride. It's made up of 2 different atoms. Sodium and chlorine are perfectly happy to share their 1 electron, and they don't break down for thousands of years. So is Jesus making some kind of mistake here? Now, salt does sometimes cake. You ever notice in the restaurant, maybe at home, you got to put some rice in there in the shaker to keep it from caking together? It will cake. But it will stay salty longer than you'll be on this earth. Does Jesus make a mistake? Some would say that Jesus is just asking here a hypothetical question. Imagine if it were possible that salt were to lose its flavor. Actually, the truth is, ancient first century salt was not the pure kind that you have, a chemical compound. It was sea salt. And the sea salt was made up of many different minerals. And when any water would hit it, it would wash away in a saline solution, the salt compound, and be left with a bunch of minerals. You would have salt that wasn't salty. So what do you do with salt that's not salty? You throw it out, but they wouldn't throw it out their window, because what does salt do to your grass? It kills it, right? So they'd throw it out in the street where it would be trampled underfoot. Jesus says that's what you do with salt that's lost its saltiness. It shouldn't happen. It can't. But it does. And when salt is not functioning as salt, you get rid of it. Jesus says you throw it out and trample it underfoot. Now, do you want Jesus to look at you? Do you want Jesus to look at us and say, what good is First Baptist Church? And throw us out? So what do? Actually, salt, when it's thrown on the street, actually does have a function, right? When do we throw salt in the street? When it rains, or when it's snowy or icy, right? It even functions when it doesn't have the salt anymore. It's even then good for something. But I don't want to be good for nothing to Jesus. How about you? If we fail in our mission to be different and make a difference and be the salt, Jesus looks at us and says, what's the use? One more question. Where are we supposed to salt? That's right in the title of this point, salting where you are. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. We know what we're supposed to do, but where? It's right there. Salt of the earth. The word there for earth in Greek is a word you know, geo, geography, geometry. And it has to do with our planet as a place. So we put it right in the mission. Salt where you are. You are salt, but you don't do any good in the shaker, right? This is the shaker. We're all gathered here, that's great. But salt in the shaker doesn't do anybody any good. You got to pour it out, right? And Jesus wants us to get out there where we can make a difference. At home, school, work, and neighborhood. As you saw on our caution tape this past week, I wanted you to remember last week, every time you opened up a door with your caution tape key ring, I wanted you to remember your dangerous mission. This week, I want you to remember every time you salt your food. You don't salt your food every time you season your food. If you don't season your food every time you eat your food. To remember your dangerous mission, that God calls you to get out of the salt shaker into the world and to make a difference. Jesus says you're salt. Not you should be salt. He says you are salt. Now, be salty and make a difference. Let me tell you Mark and Holly's story. Remember, they were trapped in Papua New Guinea. A 3-hour boat ride away from the closest plane, a 7-hour flight from the closest hospital, and their little boy, Brent, was having constant seizures. They called headquarters for their mission 3 hours away, and they said, we need you to get a plane ready. Little Brent is having seizures. We need to get to the hospital right away. And the pilot said, you better hurry. He said, the sun's going to set in 3 hours, and we can't leave after sunset. You better hurry up and get here. And so they had to get on their little boat, one little tiny outboard motor. And as they started, they saw that the banks were real low. The water was low, and wasn't too long before they came when the water was dried up. They had to get out of the boat and drag it across the mud to the next place where the river was enough that they could start the motor up again. And so they did this for 5 hours and arrived 2 hours after sunset. And they thought, that's it. We're going to lose our boy. They got there after dark. The airport was closed. They didn't see anybody. And they thought, have we come all this way to Papua New Guinea to be the salt and the light of the world and lose our child? We didn't realize how dangerous our mission was going to be. God calls you to a dangerous mission, to be salt, to be light. Let's look at that second part, the light. And our second part of the mission is lighting what is there. Jesus gives us our mission in two easy remembered things, salt and light. Light makes more of a difference than salt does, doesn't it? Do you want to go without salt for a week or without light for a week? I don't want to do without salt for a week, but I would survive. Probably you would too. Light? Actually, one of the 10 plagues in Egypt was a lack of light, and even one day. Anybody lose their electricity for a day in the hurricane? Oh, that's pretty tough, right? It's not so plaguey to lose salt for 24 hours, right? I don't know, if we were to take all the salt out of the world, that would probably be pretty bad. If all the oceans didn't have salt in them, they'd probably go bad. It would be an ecological disaster, and our life as we know it would be probably threatened. But if there was no light on the earth, life as we know it would end. There would be no photosynthesis. There would be not only just darkness, but there would be no life. Light is so vital. Jesus doesn't, again, technically call us to be light. He says, you are the light of the world. Actually, when he was on the earth, he said, John 9:5, as long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. But Jesus is no longer in the world. So you know what he says? You are the light of the world. Again, notice he didn't say you should be light. He says you are the light. I used to be the light, but now you're the light. You're the only light the world gets, whether you know it or not, whether you act like it or not. So is this not really a mission to be light? No, it's not. It's the function as light because that's what we already are. God is not out there looking for volunteers. Who wants to be light today? Come on, raise your hands. Actually, the world does need light, but he's not just asking us to be something we're not. He's telling us to be what we are, to function as we are supposed to. Come on, light. Be light. It's dark out there. Get out there and do your job. Come on, child of God. Not be a child of God. You are a child of God. Act like a child of God. Do your job. Again, what is our job exactly? What does light do? First, the most obvious thing it does, for those of us with sight, is it brings sight. It makes vision possible. It makes things visible. So we're lighting what is already there. It's there, but we can't see it until the light's turned on. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. Let your light so shine before men, verse 16, that they may see. It's there whether we see it or not. So it says, turn the light so people can see what's there. This is the second part of our mission. Now, I used to be able to see in the near darkness. I remember as a kid reading and the sun would go down, I'd still be reading. But now, after 40, I need to turn the light on. I don't need, magnifying glass or longer arms. I just need a flashlight to read in the darkness. I need to take a flashlight to some of these restaurants. Well, we're supposed to do that, right? We're supposed to be the light so people can see what's really there. Make a difference. Make Jesus visible. Ah, the world should say, now I see. Light does more than that, though. Light also brings heat and warmth and joy. James 1:11, the sun has risen with a burning heat. Does it amaze you that something 93 million miles away can burn your skin? Feels good, doesn't it? But if you stay out too long, it can burn you. I remember standing in a store not too long ago, and I was waiting in line, and I was right next to a great big window, and I was getting cooked. Now, sometimes it feels good, but after a while, it's pretty warm. It's amazing what the sun does. When it's gone, we miss it. Job 30:28 says, I go about in a sunless gloom. You ever heard of seasonal affective disorder? We used to call it the winter blues. I have a relative who has seasonal affective disorder, depression during the winter months, shorter days, less sunshine. We really miss the sun when it's gone. The sun brings joy. After a long, cold, lonely winter, something great happens. Spring training, I like that. But also Easter. And I say it's all right. And we're supposed to do that too. Like the sun, if we're not the sugar of the earth, but we're salt and light, then we are different and we make a difference and we bring warmth and joy to the world. But most of all, light brings life. We said earlier that without light, we'd all not only be blind, but dead. Why? The answer is photosynthesis. Photo means light. A photograph means a writing of light. Photosynthesis means light creating energy. And it turns light into energy every day. Without it, life on earth would cease to exist. Jesus is life. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Have you seen the light? You got the life? We are to bring that life to the world. Well, let me ask a second question about light, like we did with salt. Can light not shine? Well, you can turn it off, but it's not light. If I turn this off, that's not light, that's a lamp. If the bulb burns out, it's not light. It's bulb, but it's not light. But can light not shine? Actually, just like salt. Light can't do anything but shine. That's what light does. That's what light is. Now, there is light that is outside of our visible ranges. There's infrared light that's faster than the light we see, and there's ultraviolet light that's slower that we can't see. But it's there. But Jesus says we're to function as light. And he says right there in verse 14, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Remember the stories of bombings in England in World War II, and there would be times when everyone had turned the lights off. You don't want lights on, because if the lights were on, people would know that you were home, and the bombs would be dropped there. So, you can't stop the light from shining, turn the lights off. That's what you might do when you run out of candy at the end of this month on Halloween, and you don't want to disappoint the kids. You might turn the lights off so they don't think you're home and knock on the door. Well, what do you do with light if you don't want to be seen? It's pretty tough to hide light because light shines. The only way to stop light is to cover it. Light is always light. It always shines. The sun's still shining at night, right? We just can't see it. It still shines on a cloudy day. We still see its light on a cloudy day. But why cover light? Why put a bushel? Now, almost every light in my house has got one of these lampshades on it. That's so I don't have to look right at the light. But why would you put a bushel, a basket over it? Then, isn't the light good for nothing but to be thrown out? Well, how about a shining light covered by a blanket? The light still shines, right? But if we cover it, we wouldn't even know it's on, right? What good is the light if you cover it? I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. But isn't that what Jesus says about us? When we fail in our mission, to be different and to make a difference. One more question on light. Where are we to light? Jesus uses a different word here. We were the salt of the earth, but we're light of the world. And the word world is different than geo, the planet we live on. This word is actually another Greek word you might know. It's called cosmos. And cosmos means world, not as the planet Earth, but the system in which we live. The word cosmetic comes from cosmos, and it means to put in order. So ladies, when you put cosmetics on, you're putting your face in order. Our society is the world put in order. And when we are functioning as the light of the world, we're not supposed to light the rock that we live on. We're supposed to provide light to the culture that we live in. It's making a difference in the people that live around us. So this week, along with every time you pull out your keys, and the caution tape is tied to it, or you see that caution, every time you salt your food, every time you turn on or turn off a light, I want you to think of your job as the light of the, now especially dads, right? Our job is to go around and turn off all the lights. Who left all the lights on? Our job, my dad's only job, is to turn all the lights off. When you turn the lights off, Dad, when you turn the lights on, kids, when you turn the lights on, think that is my job. I am not called to be the light of the world. I am the light of the world, the only light the world's ever going to get. God gives us this dangerous mission, and this message won't self-destruct in 5 seconds. You know, when we turn on the light, what we don't do is look right at the light. You know, look up at the lights, and pretty soon you can't see anything. With a lampshade, it's great, but if you look right at the light, that's not what a light's for. We don't look at lights. We don't look at the sun. Please don't look at the sun. You won't see anything else. Light is not there to draw attention to itself. The light is there so that we can see everything else. God doesn't want people looking at us. He says, you are the light of the world, and you're supposed to let your light shine before men so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. It's not about us. It's about Him. But when we're the light of the world, the light's not there to look at the light. The light is so we can see everything else in the room. The sun is there, not so we can look at the sun, but so we can see everything outside. We're not there so people can look at us. We're there so they can see God in the whole world around them. And that's what Mark and Holly were called to do. Mark and Holly Woodard went to Papua New Guinea and risked their lives and the life of their son. And when they finally got to the airport 2 hours after sunset, too late to save the life of their son, they started to make the long, treacherous journey back. And someone came running up to them and said, "Are you Mark and Holly Woodard?" "Yes." They said, come here now." They said, "What's the use? It's too late. It can't make a difference." They said, "No, come now, come with me." And he began to drag them. He dragged them up to the plane. They said, "We can't take off in the dark." He said, "I know that, but get in." And Mark started to argue, and they said, "Shut up, get in the plane." Had to nearly shove him in. The pilot came over, started the plane, and started to taxi up the hill to where the actual landing strip was. And as they got over the crest of the hill, they saw an amazing sight. 150 villagers all stood there with their grass torches, holding lights up on either side of the landing strip. And they were able to take off. And the good news is, Brent was saved. They made it to the hospital. He's now a teenager. He's there ministering in Papua New Guinea with his parents, being salt and light. Is it a dangerous mission? Yes. But that's our job, isn't it? To hold up the light so that people can see. Our job is not to draw attention to ourselves, but to make a difference in the world. If we don't, then we're worthless. We're salt that's lost its flavor. We're light that's covered under a bushel. Why would we want to be that? First Baptist, we are called to be salt and light, to make a difference. Will it be dangerous? Yes. Are there risks involved? Yes. But He's not telling us to be something we're not. He's telling us to be what we are. Let's pray. God, thank you for the high calling in Jesus to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Lord, help us to be what you made us to be. Lord, if there's one here today who's never trusted in Christ as their Savior, I pray that today, right now, where they're seated, they might accept your gift of salvation by faith through Jesus Christ. They might give up on their attempts to earn your grace, but they might submit and humble themselves and recognize that they can't save themselves and accept your gift offered at the cross of forgiveness in the blood of Jesus. Lord, for those of us who are your children, those of us who have prayed to trust Christ, who are your children, who are the salt and the light, Lord, help us to be what we are. Help us not to hide our light under a bushel. Help us to get out of the salt shaker and be the salt in the world, in the earth where we're supposed to be. For in Christ's name.